Welcome to In the News for February the 18th, 2022. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
This is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. Another week and another story that we talk about AirTags.
We cannot get away from the AirTags. They're following us, Brett. That's the problem. They're following us.
I know. I just wish they would keep alerting us, but it's like, okay, well, anyway, we'll make this quick because this was an excellent story, and I'm so glad that you linked to it. You know, we have talked about the good side of AirTags and what it can be used for. We've talked about several of the bad sides of AirTags and the fact that people can use them for malicious intent or means. But this was a very good all-around story, even though the headline is a little maybe nerve-wracking. This was, although I love how the author says, I sound like the worst wife ever tracking my husband with AirTags, but it was for journalism, so that's okay. So thanks for the gift link, by the way. This was in the New York Times. It's an excellent article. I'm glad you linked to it.
What's most interesting about this article is that Kashmir Hill really tested the different products. She tried 3 ways to track a person. One was hiding an AirTag on him. One was hiding a tile on him, which, you know, those really only work if you're close to somebody else that's running the tile app, which obviously is not a lot of people, and her results reflected that. But then the third one was this little GPS tracker, and there's tons of them out there, and some of them are made by made in other countries, and they're super cheap. This is one that I've actually heard people use, like professional business people use. Land Air Sea, they may put it in, like inside of a truck in case somebody steals the truck. They can track the truck, those sorts of things. But these GPS trackers, what's interesting is that the AirTag is in the news right now because of Apple's respect for privacy, because Apple makes alerts come on saying it appears that an AirTag has been following you for the last few hours, the last day or whatever. Whereas these GPS trackers, they don't provide diddly squat for alerts. There's no way for you to know that one of these things is with you, and they're very accurate in tracking you. So it's interesting that, it's certainly good that we are all aware of this. Before Apple even came out with the AirTag, the ability to track somebody without them knowing about it has existed because of these GPS trackers for a long time. So now I guess there's sort of a greater public awareness. So I guess that's a net good. But it also shows that, if you were trying to do the wrong thing to track somebody, without, to stalk them, an AirTag is not a good way to go at all, because it's going to alert them, it's going to make noise, and that if they go to the police can go back. We talked about this last week. The police can go to Apple and say, here's the AirTag, here's the specific serial number, and they can find out who it belongs to. So it's a poor device for tracking a person. And again, Apple says that's not what it's designed for. It's designed for tracking items that you may lose, not for people. But it's interesting because this is the first article I've seen that that tries all the different options at the same time. And I strongly recommend the article to folks. It's interesting because not only does she track it, but she hired a photographer to use that information and try to take pictures of her husband without him knowing about it, which is, throughout the article, this poor guy, little does he know that there's this PI, following him around, taking pictures of him just to show how these things work. So it's a really, really interesting, well-done article. So
I think I like it, and I think one of the reasons that you link to it, it's one of the most well-rounded articles to help people kind of understand, the pros and cons. It's like look through all of the crazy headlines that we've seen about Apple AirTags. You even quoted the husband in your post here. He said, for all the bad press that AirTags have gotten, and as flaky as the detection mechanisms were, at least I was consistently getting notifications that they were following me. The privacy dangers of the other trackers were way worse. In other words, you already mentioned that Land Air Sea, which I think Kashmir here, the author of the article, said that was the most accurate. It was pinging every, I think, 3 minutes, right? So that she could literally track the car of her husband, and he went into downtown Manhattan, and she was able to track that, and it was the most accurate. But it didn't ping anything, right? He had no idea that the Land Air Sea item was tracking him, but he kept getting notifications. Even at one point of the story here, he talks about he thought it was in his shoe, and he was yelling at his wife to tell him if it's in his shoe because he didn't want to tear his shoe apart because he thought that's where it was. It turns out, I think she had hid it in his backpack or something similar like that. But, that was just interesting. Like, AirTags are going to do the best that they can to alert you that there is this item that may be tracking you. And the husband said that was at least made him feel a little bit better about it, I guess, about being tracked like this. By the way, he agreed to this, by the way. So he's agreed to other things like this in the past because of her job. But it was such a well-rounded story. And then lastly, I'll just say quickly, they talked about here, like the Land Air Sea, you mentioned this, works with satellites, right? And that's one of the reasons that it's constantly pinging. I think, what was that movie with Will Smith, way back in the day, right? The state of, like, you were being tracked like that. Like, to me, I figure that that's something a little more similar. But the AirTags do not work with the satellite. In fact, it works best. She even said here, it worked best. The AirTags worked best when her husband was in downtown New York, where there are millions of iPhones in close proximity, and the AirTag was very accurate then. But when he was outside the city and was driving in a place where there may not have been as many iPhones, the AirTag wasn't quite as accurate.
Yeah. So even aside from all the stalking issues, just in terms of understanding the limitations, if you have an AirTag in a backpack that falls out of the window of your car when you're driving down the interstate and it's just on the side of the road, it's very unlikely that it's going to do a good job. I mean, it'll know where it was last seen when it left you, but unless somebody, drives by slowly enough that their iPhone notices the AirTag, which, probably would not happen on an interstate, you're not going to be able to track the current location of that AirTag. But a device that has GPS in it, like one of these GPS trackers, or frankly, if you just hid like a cell phone on somebody else and it just stayed there until the cell phone battery died, something that has its own GPS in it, it's going to always know where it is. So that's just useful to think, because somebody might lose something and say, hey, I had an AirTag in it. Why can't I find my purse? Well, because maybe your purse is in a place where nobody else is walking around with an iPhone nearby. Now, downtown Manhattan, I mean, there's going to be a bajillion iPhones walking by. So it's interesting.
Very good. This just in, I just saw this, and I think this was from yesterday. New York Attorney General issues consumer warning about AirTags. Maybe we'll hear a little bit more about this, but the Attorney General just yesterday was issuing this, that tracking people without their awareness or consent is a serious felony. I think this just goes to your point. Like, this is what's getting the press these days. This is something that's always been around. We've always had these tools to be able to track people. It's just now, I think it's a little bit more consumerized, as it were.
Well, because of the alerts from the Apple AirTag, it's now more in the public awareness. And so people are confused. People are asking the police. They're asking the Attorney General. They're asking other people. So, I mean, it is a net good that public awareness will increase on this. And I don't think you should fault Apple for alerting people of this. Just the opposite. Agreed. You would fault Apple if they worked the same way that a regular GPS tracker did and does not provide any notice. So yeah.
All right, so we'll look forward to maybe next week when it'll be AirTag free, but maybe not.
We shall see.
you even leaked to one other story I thought was great from David Sparks over at MacSparky.com, and he was talking about a little product, or I guess it's almost like just a little piece of hard rubber that an AirTag fits in the middle of it in a circle, because it's created so that you could put this into your wallet. It sounds like David wasn't the most impressed with it, because I like what he says here. It doesn't magically make the AirTag any smaller or thinner, right?
It's still
pretty fat. It's still pretty fat when it fits into your wallet. But I'm glad that you linked to this, because I always enjoy hearing about what David is trying to work on, and then he was using some kind of a weird duct tape thing here, or gaffer's tape, to tape an AirTag into his own wallet, because the Elevation Labs item was too thick. Anyway, this is funny. I'm glad that you linked to that as well. So if you're not tired of AirTags just yet, then that's another great story. So let's go from AirTags to wireless CarPlay, or let's just talk CarPlay. You and I both have expressed our love for CarPlay, Apple CarPlay, many, many times. Still love it, but we've often talked about the idea of, too, that in order to use CarPlay, at least in my car, I don't have one that's wireless, but in my car, I got to get in and I have to literally plug the phone into a cord that's connected to my car. Not a big deal. And I always like it, because you mentioned this, it charges the phone at the same time. But I can absolutely see why it would be great to just be able to keep the phone in my pocket, or just set it down anywhere in the car, and it will automatically and wirelessly connect to CarPlay. Now, I know some cars do this automatically, but you had a good link to CarPlay Life website, which is great, I think, to the Ottocast U2 AirFast wireless CarPlay adapter. This was a good video from the gentleman here that writes this.
Yeah, it's a neat little device if you want to have wireless. Apple came out with the ability for CarPlay to be wireless, but very few. And when I say few, I think maybe only one. I think maybe it's either BMW, if I remember correctly.
Oh,
I forget
you're
which.
right.
But there's really like it is very hard to find a car that has wireless CarPlay built into it. But if you have regular CarPlay, which just about every new car has nowadays, you can use this little dongle to give it a wireless capability. So again, I really don't see the advantage of it because I like being able to charge it. The car that I have, actually mine doesn't have, but my wife's does. It actually has like a little place in the Honda Odyssey where you can just set your iPhone down onto a mat, and it is a wireless charging mat. Right. So you could do that, and so then you would be wirelessly charging your iPhone. And you could, with this dongle, wirelessly connect to CarPlay. Although I'm not sure I'm thrilled about that because even though the mat is like sort of rubbery and sticky, maybe what if the iPhone falls off if you stop short or something? I actually consider it an advantage to plug in the iPhone. But if you don't, and I can understand your iPhone's in your pocket and you just don't want to, maybe you don't need to charge it. It's been charging with you all day, and you just want to, have your iPhone stay in your pocket and have CarPlay just work magically. Well, then maybe you can try one of these. Now, he has, if you're interested in these products, his video is good because he actually tries it and he includes some comments at the bottom of the video where he points out that, for example, the first unit he got had some problems with it. He had to return it and get a second unit. And that even that unit, after he had filmed the video, he puts at the bottom, he would get like a black screen and he had to unplug it and restart it and stuff. So this thing it's not very expensive. Well, it's actually a little expensive, but I want to say it was like $80. Under $100, but it's not perfect. I mean, these things, it really reminds me of the days before CarPlay, when there were lots of different options for getting your iPhone to play music in your car, and all of them had drawbacks one way or the other. Whether you try to connect to a radio station or whether you use Bluetooth, that was never perfect. CarPlay, you plug it in, pretty much can always. The cassette adapter was a big one, but then nowadays cars, don't come with cassette players anymore. So
I'm old.
It's nice that we have CarPlay, the wired CarPlay, because it resolves all of that stuff. But if you want to do the wireless, that you absolutely should look at this video. And he talks about some of the other products that do the same thing and explains why this particular product is probably, at least according to him, one of the best ones for wireless CarPlay.
We are all looking forward to Apple's release of iOS 15.4. You and I have talked about some big things that we're looking for in 15.4, but you had a couple of links today that I liked where there are some little small things. This is iOS 15.4 podcast apps adds new filtering and browsing options. And let me see, there was another story you linked to. Oh, shortcut
on
automation.
Shortcuts.
Yeah. This is good. I mean, I think I just saw beta 3 of 15.4 has been released, which tells us regular people that it's pretty close. Like we've been talking about this for several weeks now, but I'm glad that you linked to this. Like there's some big things coming in 15.4 and there's some really nice little tweaks as coming as well. Yeah.
And so, we're learning more about 15.4 every single day, I guess is the real message of this. And I know we can see from, there's not a lot that that you and I, Brett, can see about folks that listen to this podcast, but it looks like by far the number one app that people use is the Overcast app. But I think the number 2 app is the Apple Podcast app. If you're listening to this podcast and you use the podcast app with 15.4, you'll be able to have more options, many of which, frankly, are options that already exist in the Overcast app, but in order to filter episodes. And so it's good to see, since the Apple Podcast app is built into the phone, that's probably the one that a lot of folks start with and maybe stick with. And so I'm glad that Apple is making that product more robust. And as for the other change coming that you mentioned on shortcuts automations, that's a nice one because you can currently have a shortcut that, like, when something happens, it will automatically start a shortcut. So like at a certain time of day, it will do something. But right now it's a little annoying because even though you created the shortcut, so of course you anticipate it happening, an alert comes up on your screen, which just sort of, sometimes you may have to touch it or it gets in the way. So it will be nice to have an option of just saying, I don't need this to happen anymore. It can just happen automatically. So anytime that I do this, have that happen and just happen. So, maybe there's a little bit of risk there if somebody doesn't understand what they did, but I suspect that most folks who are sophisticated to, number one, run the shortcut, put it on the phone in the first place, and then number 2, turn off the setting of having the alerts. anyone that does both of that by definition is a person that it is perfectly fine to not have an alert, and certainly a lot less annoying for them to turn off those alerts. That's a good change.
I was wondering about that shortcut automation, but thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And now I'm looking forward to that as well. Our friend Jason Snell, well, I don't know him personally, but I feel like I do because we've been reading him for years and years, and he has his own website, 6 Colors, but he writes for Macworld quite often. And let me just say the topic of this article that you linked to is about the App Store, which I don't know if we've talked about it a whole lot on this podcast, Jeff, other than, here's it's available in the App Store, that kind of a thing. But there's a lot of people that have been pushing Apple. I guess we have to some extent with the Epic issues and the litigation that's come up in other countries. There's a lot of people that are saying that Apple should open up the App Store, allow us to install and download apps from other places other than the App Store. I thought this was a very well-reasoned story from Jason Snell, where he actually says they should open it up. And I like his comparison to the way that we download and install apps on the Mac. But even you made a comment in your post, Jeff. I don't know if I fully agree with it. I still like, as a regular user, I still like knowing that security is there. From when I download or purchase an app, it comes from the App Store. That means Apple has looked at it. I know there's a lot of problems, and a lot of people point out, with different apps and stuff like that. But this was a good article. If you are interested in kind of looking at both sides of the arguments there, that Jason Snell did a good job here. And Apple's worst case scenario might be the best thing for the iPhone.
Yeah, reasonable minds can differ on this one. Jason's basic premise was on a Mac. On a Mac, there is an Apple App Store that you can use to download apps, but you don't have to use it. You could download an app from somewhere else, and there will be a security alert that comes up that warns you that this is from somewhere else on the internet. You can decide, I'm going to go ahead and install it anyway. And if it turns out that you installed something that was malware, if you installed a virus on your computer, well, that's your fault. You installed it. If you had stuck to only installing things. And so the issue is, and this is always the debate: do you want to let people the freedom to do whatever they want, even at their own peril, or do you want things to be safer? And I personally am comfortable with the current distinction where on a computer, on a Mac, or certainly on a PC, you can install whatever you want. If you get yourself in trouble, that's your own fault. But you take on those risks. On the other hand, for something like an iPhone that's supposed to be easier to use, it's with you at all times. And so the privacy implications of like some third-party software that you installed from a non-Apple app store that you didn't realize that this app, not only does it give you the weather, but oh, by the way, it's also going to tell somebody where you are 24/7, and they can sell that information to a third party who advertises you. And the next thing you know, you walk down the street and it says, oh, I see that you're passing a cookie store. Let me tell you something about that. You're like, oh, that's a little too intrusive to me. So I like the fact that Apple has this closed system with the App Store. But I totally understand how some people say, no, I want to have, full openness. And that is the number one reason, Brett, that people tell me that they use an Android phone versus an iPhone.
Exactly.
They like that an Android, yes, there is a Google Play App Store, but you don't have to use it. You can do whatever you want. You can change virtually anything, no matter how ugly it might make your Android phone look, or what risks you may have of installing malware. You have that freedom. And so, that is the debate. One interesting point that Jason makes in here is that he says if the iPhone apps and iPad App Store allowed for non-App Store purchases, that maybe over time a side effect of it is that Apple would make its own App Store more accommodating and would allow you to do more things. And I'll give you a perfect example. On a computer, it's very easy to install an app that manages that watches your clipboard, and maybe even something like Text Expander that does something with it. And so it always knows, even after you switch different programs from program to program to program, it always knows what's on your clipboard. On the iPhone, currently, that's not allowed because it would be one app, a clipboard manager app, snooping on another app. And so Jason's idea is, if Apple allowed third-party app stores and then over time realized that certain types of apps are probably not that dangerous, and maybe it would lead Apple to open up the App Store itself. And I guess that's a theory. I personally would prefer it to happen the way it is now, which is that Apple over time has expanded what the App Store allows. And you can make arguments about to whether they've gone far enough or maybe not far enough. But Yeah, so it's an interesting discussion, and it's one that will continue. The reason, as you mentioned at the beginning, that it's in the news is not only the Epic lawsuit, but there's been other governments around the world that have been challenging Apple and Google, saying that you can't just have an app store. You should open it up, and it's sort of like a anti-competitive type thing. And that's way above my pay grade to get into all of those implications. But it's not an easy decision. You can make arguments on both sides.
Yeah, we have not heard the end of this. I'll just throw one other. It's maybe a little bit of a weak argument, but it's important to me is convenience. I love just the idea that I can go to the App Store. Like I know there's one place. I don't have to jump through other individual hoops. There would be whole other system in order to install something on my iPhone. And my example is on my Mac, there are software packages that give me both options, right? I can either buy this through the Mac App Store, or I could go to the website of the developer and buy it directly from them. And I'm torn sometimes because I want to make sure that the developer gets as much money and support, which means that if I buy it directly from them, they would get more. But if I bought it through the App Store, number one, the App Store would keep track of all of my purchase history. I would have access to all of that information there. But of course, Apple takes 30% of the cut, right? Or 15%, depending on there's different tiers that they have now. So anyway, I will typically go to the Mac App Store and I will buy it through there just because I like everything being in one place. I can see my purchase history. If I have to, sign in and re-download it to a new Mac, it's all in one place. I don't have to remember all the different websites. Anyway, I think that's another argument. And I know there's, like you said, reasonable minds can differ on this, but I think the convenience aspect is another pretty important component as well. But thanks for linking to that. I think that's good. So another story that you linked to today, which I thought was great. This is from the Wirecutter, a great website. How to clean your phone. Now, this could be any phone, but they're showing the iPhone, and this is what I've done. I think this is great. A lot of people ask this. We typically just rub it off. We're upset about fingerprints maybe on there. Using a white, but one thing that stuck out in here is they recommend using a toothpick to clean out your phone's ports. And I've actually done this several times, even to like the horror of my wife and kids. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing with that toothpick? You're sticking it in. But it is better to do that because sometimes when I've carried my phone like in my back pocket or even in a suit pocket, sometimes there's little lint that gets into the lightning port there. And I have gone to the point where sometimes that the phone stops charging because there's lint that is, that's been packed in there that I can't put the lightning cable. I know it sounds a little disgusting, I guess, but the best way that I have found to get that out is to use a toothpick. Because using something metal, you could damage some of the internal things. You don't want to use a Q-tip because that could put more lint in there. So I'm glad that you linked to this, and I just wanted to make that point that as horrifying as it sounds, using a toothpick to clean out the lint from the port is a very good idea. Not all the time, but when
Nick has some good advice in here for cleaning your iPhone. And the toothpick tip is also good for your AirPods, because I don't need to talk about how disgusting your AirPods can get in your ear. And so if you need to take some of that stuff out, you can use a toothpick for that too, and just sort of very delicately clean it out.
He does say, little disclaimer, I guess, none of the 3 phone manufacturers we researched provided any guidance on this kind of cleaning, but we have always had success with a gentle touch. There's always a risk, but using a toothpick is the best thing to do. So good. We'll have that link in the show notes, and thank you for linking to that. Next, how about a free Apple Watch?
This is a funny one.
All you need to do is make sure that you exercise 35% more than you already are. Great story you linked to here, Jeff.
This happens to be an Australian health insurance company, but I've actually heard about some American health insurance companies that do it too. Obviously your health insurance company wants you to be healthy because then there's less things for them to pay for in insurance. And so one of the things that can encourage you to be more healthy is to use an Apple Watch and to stay active. But this one is interesting because it had some statistics in it. I mean, they actually say that, they gave you an Apple Watch, and if you exercised, this many 4 days a week, then you can get it, you won't have to pay anything that month. If you exercise 3 days a week, you have to pay $12 that month. If you exercised just 1 day a week, you have to pay $22 that month. And so it provides you with a clear economic incentive
I
to
love it.
exercise and be active. And as I joked in my post, I mean, this whole report probably says more about human psychology and what people will do to get something for free than it really does about the Apple Watch. And yet, at the same time, aside from insurance stuff, I will admit one of the things that I really enjoy about my Apple Watch is it encourages me to be more active because I look at my circles every day. And if it's near the end of the day and I've had one of those days where I'm just been sitting in my office, typing on my computer all day, I've been very inactive, and I see that I've got 7 green circles, then I'm like, okay, maybe I should get on the treadmill and try to get active, or maybe I could, go use the Fitness Plus program for Apple TV and do some moving around just to sort of keep my heart pumping and get myself moving. And, before the Apple Watch, there was no incentive for me to do it. But when you can quantify it, when you can actually see, gosh, I really probably should exercise for 20 minutes today. It totally encourages me to do it. And, what incremental impact that has on health, I don't think it hurts.
It can't hurt.
Yeah.
Well, I'll even add one on top of that. Once you start competing with your family members or other friends, then it's even more. It's like, I can't tell you how many times oh, my wife worked out earlier today. Now I've got to get out there because I can't let her beat me on the and then my daughter is now starting to work out and she's doing even better than both of us. And it just irks me. But it's funny. If that's some kind of a motivation, that's great. But anyway, thanks for linking to this story. This is great. I would do it. I would do this in a heartbeat. Like you said, it's almost like gamifying it for me. But
Absolutely.
It's like if the health company is willing to offer something like an Apple Watch, and again, like you said, some other companies do a Fitbit or something else similar like that. But man, give me an Apple Watch and I'm doing it. I will do an extra 20 push-ups and run an extra half a mile. That's great. We can get that happening. All right, good stuff there. Okay, in the know. Let's do a couple of tips. Mine will be a little bit of a self-serving, but I think it'll be practical. I've just relaunched my iPractice on an iPad courses. Now, mostly this is designed for legal professionals or even really all professionals. But this is my website, iPracticeOnAnIPad.com. And I've got 3 different courses, one of which is brand new. It is about editing Microsoft Word documents. So what I was going to say, I've got a couple of tips that I find that I released this earlier this past week, and people were really appreciating this tip. There are a couple of tips about selecting text inside Microsoft Word. I think I've got the video down here. Yeah, handy tips on selecting text in Microsoft Word. And this is really good because I find if you're editing Word documents on the iPad or even the iPhone, I just do it more on the iPad or on my computer, is that if you want to apply some formatting to either the font or a sentence or the paragraph, anything along those lines, the first thing you got to do is select the text, of course, right? Now, the old way is we had to tap and hold on a word. And by the way, this can apply to emails and notes as well. But I just use this a lot in Word because I'm usually doing a lot of formatting of text. Tap and hold. And if you tap and hold on the screen on a word, eventually what they call the edit menu, the little black bar comes up at the top, and there is a select option in that edit menu. And if you tap on select, it'll select the word on which you were tapping and holding right there. And then, of course, as usual, there's a little blue bubbles, little blue dots right at the beginning and end, and you can use those to pull and expand the selection there. Now, I still do that sometimes, but probably what I use more than anything else are these handy tips. If you want to select a word quickly, just simply double tap on that word, tap, and that will immediately select the word. And then you can apply bold formatting or change the font, whatever. If you want to select the entire paragraph, you can triple tap. Now, depending on the app I have found, Jeff, sometimes a triple tap will just select the sentence in which you triple tap. But in Word, if you triple tap on a word in Microsoft Word, it will select the entire paragraph, which I found is okay because I like to apply the formatting to the entire paragraph. So double tap to select a word, triple tap to select the entire paragraph. That's great because if you are a tapper and you're on the iPad, that works out really quick. And you can see, I'll link to my video here where I just go through and demonstrate this. Now, if you have an external keyboard attached to your iPad, you can use that external keyboard to select text in there as well. If you just tap on the screen so that your cursor is blinking in your text, you can hold down the shift and use the left and right arrows on your external keyboard to select each letter at a time, or each character, if that makes sense. So shift and left and right arrow. But if you add the alt or the option key, so shift, option, and left and right arrow, it will select one word at a time. So it's very easy. I know the explanation is a little bit longer, but it's very easy to understand this. And if you just go and use your external keyboard with Microsoft Word, these are some really neat ways to just keep in the muscle memory, as it were, to make sure that you're able to select that text really quickly on there. And I'll have the link to my little video and the courses if anybody is interested.
Yeah, that's a great tip, because the traditional way to select text, where you sort of start at the beginning and go to the end, sometimes on an iPad or an iPhone, it can be hard to be precise. It is so much faster if you want to just like delete a paragraph or, copy it and paste it somewhere else, just to do that triple tap in the middle. It is worlds better. You don't have to worry about, did I correctly select the first letter of the first word and the last letter? That's a great tip, and I use it all the time. So thank you for that.
Excellent.
Absolutely. So since we're in Microsoft Word here, my tip is going to be a Word tip too, which is as useful as it is to use Word if you're going to actually be looking at a Word document and editing it and all those annotating and all that stuff. Many times, I think the number one reason that I use Word is just to sort of get something into a PDF format, because lots of times I find it more useful to have a PDF version. So for example, if I'm going into a meeting and I'm going to be taking notes using the Good Notes app on my iPad, the agenda may be circulated as a Word document, and I want to just take that Word document and put it into my agenda. And so I just need to quickly turn it into a PDF. And although there's a number of ways you can do it, for me, the fastest way to do it is to use Microsoft Word. It's going to be the best one. It's going to do the best job. And so all you do is when you open up a document into Microsoft Word, at the very top right of the screen, both the iPad and the iPhone, the most right icon are 3 dots, but the one right next to it is a square with an arrow on it. And so if you tap that, that is the share function. And once you have the share function, if you sort of scroll down a little bit, there's a little link that says send a copy. And you can choose whether your copy is in Word format, which I don't want, or if I change the format to PDF, now it's the format that I want. And at that point, there's something you can tap that says send with another app. And that's where I choose what I'm going to do. If I'm going to save it as a PDF version in Dropbox, or am I going to put it in an email that I want to email it to someone in PDF format? Do I want to open it up in Good Notes like I just described? Do I want to open it up in, some other PDF expert? And so I do that all the time, because lots of times I find that, here's another example. If I'm in PDF Expert and I just want to review the document, although PDF Expert can open Word documents, it's a little weird, because you lose the bar at the top that lets you annotate it, and you can't see the other tabs. It's far better if you don't plan on actually, editing the Microsoft Word document. If you just want to read it, it's far better to have it in a PDF format. So, every time that you do this, you're only going to be in the Microsoft Word app for 3 or 4 seconds, but it is a really, really useful, use of the Microsoft Word app, and it's a good reason to have it. So that's my tip, is use the Microsoft Word app on your iPad or your iPhone to turn that Word document into a PDF file, because once it's in PDF format, there's just many, many, many more things that you can do.
Excellent tip. I liken it to what we do on the computer. You and I probably remember the days where, Microsoft Word would not save to a PDF, right? We had to have the Adobe Acrobat software installed, and you had to print a PDF. Now today on a computer, I do this all the time, just like I'm sure you do, Jeff. I open up a Word document and I say save as PDF. You can still print a PDF, but you can do a save as PDF, which is great. And so I'd liken it on my iPad to do exactly what you just described, because I think the other point quickly is opening that Word document in the Microsoft Word app will retain what we call the file fidelity, right? It'll look exactly the way it looks. The formatting is going to be on point. And to me, that's going to give you the most accurate and true representation of the PDF version of that Word document if you do it in Word. Like you said, there's many other apps that will convert to PDF, but I think I would trust, if I have a Word document, I'm going to trust the Microsoft Word conversion process into PDF. What an excellent tip. Thank you on that too. So great. Another week. And hopefully next week, maybe no more AirTags. Maybe there will be. We'll see.
Time will tell.
Thanks as always, Jeff, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.